group has identified East Africa and public-private partnerships in the form of our product set, which is energy and infrastructure, as a way to facilitate economic growth. We really see that linkage with the private sector and the public sector being very critical to unlocking one, infrastructure backlog, but also financing mechanisms that can facilitate how those projects come to the market in order to serve economies. Where that narrative for public-private partnerships being a mechanism that can facilitate governments to implement infrastructure is really driven by the numbers that we have seen, which really range from anything from $90 to $200 billion deficit that government needs annually to implement their development programs. Where we come in as a financial institution is to facilitate the funding that is required to implement those projects. And what we do is really partner with our clients who are in the private sector, who have the know-how in terms of the technical expertise, the legal expertise, and really the ability to build and implement projects such that they're able to meet the requirements that government wants, whether it's a good or a service. A lot of the times it is really driven by government's procurement process. And I think when we talk about procurement process, it's not really a tick box exercise. It's really to understand what is the policy objective saying about this good and service. Who are the line ministries? Who are the stakeholders? And are we aligned in terms of the objectives, but also are we aligned in terms of what the service delivery is and what the key performance metrics will be to determine whether this good or service is being delivered in a sustainable manner, but also in a manner that is of quality that the private sector would have entered into contractually to deliver. Most recently, we are seeing, due to the tariffs which have been imposed globally, a change in possibly how supply chains will work. Of course, that requires a rapid shift, which not everybody has preempted or has readily liquidity to be able to pivot as these new dynamics are changing. A narrative which has prevailed more recently as well has really been to say, are we understanding what solutions are in place to deliver what economic markets require, what citizens require, and what is really required to make economic growth catapult and grow. What we're seeking to do is engage our industry partners, the regulatory framework, investors in the form of private sector investors who have done projects, but also understanding what their key requirements are. Are they looking at the market size? Are they looking at the market scale? And what are their success metrics that they look at when they've made an investment decision? And now, secondly, of course, to facilitate the investment, the capital investment that's required to implement those projects. What sources of liquidity are there? Are there pension funds, institutional funds? And thirdly, we're also seeking to speak to our public sector stakeholders, because ultimately they're the ones with the primary need to develop projects. If we don't understand the strategic objectives, their operating environment, it becomes a bit difficult to bring the two together, the private sector and the public sector, to really develop a project which makes sense, a project that is sustainable, and a project that will be bought into by the public sector and the private sector, as well as the market, because ultimately the success of a PPP will be how it's received in the market, as well as how the longevity of its success is relative to the contractual arrangement that's entered into on day one.